Okay, so before we start with the G5 review, let's put the price into context. This is the Samsung Galaxy S8. It costs £689. This is the Moto G5. It costs just £160. Now, of course, it doesn't look anywhere near as good or have all the fancy bells and whistles as the flagship S8, but it's less than a quarter of the price. And you know what? I actually really like it. So if you are considering buying a phone like this, you basically want something that's cheap and cheerful, practical, does the job. So let me start by showing you that just because this is a budget phone with kind of rubbish specs, we've got a Snapdragon 430 and just 2 GB of RAM on this model, surprisingly, it handles pretty much everything I threw at it. Games like Need for Speed Most Wanted look great and play flawlessly, and the fact that it runs a near stock version of the latest Android 7 Nougat software means everything feels really smooth and responsive. Of course, that's not to say you wouldn't notice the speed difference between the G5 and say the Galaxy S8 or the Google Pixel. Of course, they're faster overall. But considering the price difference, the performance on the G5 is very impressive. And this is actually the cheapest model with just 2 gigs of RAM and 16 gigabytes of storage. If you want to pay about 20 more, you can get an extra gig of RAM and double the storage. So it's good to know though that even this lower spec model performs well, although if I was personally going to buy the G5, I would spend just that little bit extra and go for the higher spec version. Okay, so it's reasonably fast and it'll handle pretty much anything you throw at it, but of course, with a budget phone like this, there are some compromises. The design, for example, is, well, inoffensive, let's just say that. The aluminium body, actually, surprisingly, I didn't think it was aluminium, I thought it was plastic. I had to actually check that because it feels a bit plasticky. It comes in either grey, like we've got here, or gold. And I suppose it looks reasonably smart, but it does have quite thick bezels around the screen, and it's also quite chunky at 9.5mm thick, so it does feel quite big for a 5-inch phone in your hand. You can also take the back off the phone, revealing the big removable battery, so you can hot swap that out, and also the micro SD and nano SIM card slots. Ugh. Now for me, one of the standout features of the G5 is the 5-inch Full HD display. It's bright, vibrant, and really sharp. If it wasn't for the fat bezels around this thing, you'd quite quickly forget this was supposed to be a cheap budget phone. It's a great screen to look at. But now let's talk about the camera, because in my experience, this is the biggest difference between a cheap and a more expensive phone generally. I'm pleasantly surprised to find the G5 with its 13 megapixel f2.0 camera is not actually that bad at all. With HDR mode on auto, I found the G5 produced some really nice photos in good light, with an impressive amount of dynamic range between the dark and the light areas. But as you'd expect, like most budget phones, it does suffer in low light, and since there's no optical image stabilization, it's quite easy for photos to come out blurry. The 5 megapixel front-facing camera does a decent job too, more than good enough for a quick selfie to post on Instagram or Facebook, and video quality is better than you'd expect as well. Even though it's only capable of shooting 1080p at 30 FPS, so there's no 4K option here, it looks good, and the best part is the video stabilization works really well, meaning you get nice and smooth footage. As for the battery life, well, the 2800 mAh cell will just about get you through a full day. The Snapdragon 430 chip in this isn't the most efficient. It's built on the older 28nm fabrication process. Don't worry if that's a bit too technical. Basically, it just means it's not the most efficient, which means it consumes a bit more battery. So you're not going to get the best battery life out of this. But then again, if you use the power saving mode, ration it a little bit, you're not playing games all day, you will definitely get through a full day with this, which is pretty much all anyone needs because I think most of us charge it overnight anyway. And also it does support fast charging, but make sure you use the turbocharge power plug that comes bundled with it, because if you use any other one, it charges really slowly. Call quality is good, but I would avoid using the phone's speaker, which is actually the earpiece. Surprisingly, there's no other speaker on the bottom or around the phone. This is the one and only speaker. So if you like to listen to music or watch videos on this, I guess it's fine, it'll do, but a good pair of headphones will be much better. So this is the G5, but you also have the option of the slightly bigger 5.2-inch Moto G5 Plus. That'll set you back about 70 more than the base G5, but comes with a bigger screen, more powerful Snapdragon 625 processor, up to 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigabytes of storage, as well as a better camera, because even though it drops 1 megapixel, this is 13, the G5 Plus has a 12 megapixel camera, it has a much wider f1.7 aperture, so it lets a lot more light in, it's a lot better at low light photography. So the G5 Plus is a better phone overall, but it does cost around £250 or $250, which is still very good value, but personally I think the 3GB model of the standard G5 is the best bang for buck. Overall, I'm dead impressed with the G5. It runs every app I throw at it, including some pretty graphically intensive games, and generally it's just really nice to use. I love the fact that it's near stock Android, and you really can't complain given the price. So I think this, the G5, as well as the G5 Plus, if you want to spend a little bit more, are kind of the best phones you can buy right now if you're on a bit of a budget. But if you are interested in buying one of these, you can find links in the description below, and let me know what you make of the G5 and G5 Plus, and also just cheap phones generally in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please give me that thumbs up and click that subscribe button right there. And well, I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chap. Take it easy.